We're talking about their cookbook today and how they've pivoted, even more their adventures after 60, even though we all know you're only 29 plus.
Don't say the number.
Right.
Marcia knows.
But it's a little surprising, right? You were, Elisa, you were the CEO of a perishable food manufacturing company. And Rob, you are a former lawyer who grew up in a food family and to run several food companies. So while a cookbook wasn't a direct link to what you do, it is still a bit surprising. So I want to welcome you both. I want to say thank you for joining us from the Berkshires, and I can't wait to get started. So let's jump right in.
Thank you. Sure, go on.
So you're not farmers, but this is a book about farming. And it's a book about cooking, and you're a journalist and a lawyer. So let's start by saying, what happened? How did this come about?
Okay, we'll be polite. Who wants to start?
Go ahead. How were we inspired? And I'll add it.
So we've had, Sherry, thank you for asking. We've had a number of careers. And as I've said to our children many times over, there's no such thing as having one career. You can have many. They can be lateral, they can be vertical, they can be whatever way they want. Basically, we sold our companies in 2007. And after having done a number of things beforehand and having had a number of careers. And at first, we became hugely involved with Jewish philanthropy, which we had done before. As I may have been mentioned earlier or not, we had started the Foundation for Jewish Camp. And then after a while, Lisa, I'll speak for myself, and then Rob, you'll speak for yourself on this. But for a number of reasons, I wanted to do more. I didn't want to abandon Jewish philanthropy, but there was more. It wasn't enough for me only. And I ended up, it was a longer story, stemming from being in a very bad bicycle accident. I wanted to go through my bucket list, and one of those items on my bucket list was becoming a professional chef. And I went to chef school, and then eventually got a master's in nutrition and became more and more involved in food. Let me stop, and Rob, do you want to mention?
Yeah, so the same thing. I've always been really interested in photography. I've been the family photographer, Sherry. So after we sold the companies, I was determined to become a better photographer. So I started going to photo workshops. I found some teachers, and I really was determined to advance my skills. I have some friends who pivoted from their careers and have become very talented and accomplished photographers. So this book was also an opportunity for me to do a project that expressed my photography, and I did take the photographs of the farmers and the chefs in the book. So it all kind of came together. As you mentioned, we have a background in the food business. For me, I'm the third generation. My grandparents, and thinking about this session, they really were entrepreneurs. They started basically the first supermarket in America. My father was a visionary entrepreneur and was always reinventing his company. So this is something I grew up with, this idea that you can do many, many different things. If you apply yourself to it, doesn't always work out. There's a lot of failures along the way as well. So we just wanted to do something relating to food, having sold our companies, and we were inspired by our son, Rafi, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about him to actually get going with this project, actually write about.
Before you even get to Rafi, though, I want to talk about, your generation was taught to find a job and stay in it for 40 years.
That's so true.
Yes,
right? They were not taught to pivot and change. That's not even my generation. It's the younger millennials.
Yes.
What do you think drove you to feel, or where did you learn that it's okay to make a change? It's okay to fail. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
And I'd love that you guys talk over each other, but I am going to direct this one to Elisa.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the only thing that I came to this talk prepared with was a quote that I wanted to insert, and this is the perfect time, from Edgar Bronfman Sr. of blessed memory, who was a true mentor to us from our involvement in Jewish philanthropy. And Edgar wrote in 2002, he wrote a book called The Third Act. I can't remember why he said third act and why it wasn't second act, but who cares? Or I got to from 1 to 3, but he said memorably, quote, "When many people retire, they discover to their dismay that they're no longer in who's who, but in who's he or who's she. The psychological change is much greater than they'd expected, but it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, the third act can be the best part of anybody's life. And that along with my father saying carpe diem to me his whole life, seize the moment, seize the day, really, really inspired us. And I've always felt that there's always another opportunity. And Edgar says it, whether it's within your current career, there's another opportunity to go to another one and post whatever career you end up with. And I don't ever use the word retire, but okay, Edgar did. There's always something else to do. And so that's always really been my guiding spirit. And it's what got us into, again, this cookbook, which was sort of a longer journey, which we can go into. And yes, it did stem from our son, Rafi, because you can learn from everybody, including your kids.
Right.
And I was always that way. I'll just say that even in law school, I spent 1 year as an intern with President Carter's administration. I did a public interest year. The second year in college, I took a year off and went to Iran and worked for the Joint Distribution Committee, teaching Iranian Jews English so they could make aliyah. So it's just something, I've always been that way personally. And having met Elisa, I think we're immediately attracted to each other because we both have a similar spirit about.
Well, clearly 38 years. Clearly 38 years, and you guys know that you have something going on that's working. But I think you referred to something that I don't want to leave behind. Sure. You mentioned having a bucket list. And do you recommend, does everybody have a bucket list? And when do you address it? Right? Do you recommend writing it out, or what do you suggest? No, I'll turn to you, Rob. You know what? You guys are so cute that, it's like I'm going to turn to you, Rob.
Oh, yeah. Okay. The answer is I do. Actually, I'm in a group that, Sherry, I know you're quite familiar with, YPO, and I want to give a big shout out. It's a global group of entrepreneurs who are incredibly inspiring people who are constantly reinventing themselves. And my group, really, with which I meet monthly now virtually, we hold each other accountable. And I do set out, goals for the year, short-term, long-term. And I really do, try to put new ones in just to help keep me focused. Of course, life gets in the way. We started our cookbook 7 years ago. And sadly, we lost all of our parents in a period of 4 years right after we started the book. And that really, that slowed us down for many years, of course. But it is good. For us, it's always been a good practice. For me, I would say. And I'm
very sorry. Your loss.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What I want to say to you before you talk, Elisa.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't have someone to accountable, like a set group, I think what you guys are saying, it's important to have a group of people that you can really turn to that will hold you accountable, whether you're writing a cookbook or whether you're just going on a walk in the morning, right? To really, in that third act, not think this act is over. Go ahead, Elisa.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that the bucket list, I think, I want people to walk out of here with a sort of take-home value as well. So I want to speak for a moment about the bucket list. I referred to it earlier and referred to it very much in passing, but I'm going to go back to it. So I thought after we sold our companies, honestly, I'd be back in business in a nanosecond. It was the mini depression. It wasn't the time. And I had a bucket list in the back of my head. But as I mentioned, I was in a super bad bicycle accident, the kind where you walk away and say, thank God I'm alive and not paralyzed and just have a bunch of broken bones. I can deal with it. And that's when I went to my bucket list and said, okay, this is the time. And look, we've all had it. I mean, I should say many of us have had experiences like this where something happens and it just catapults you into what you really want to be doing. Frankly, this catapulted me into the first item, which I mentioned was to become a professional chef, and second item to get a master's in nutrition and do a whole bunch of other stuff. I would actually say I'm really sorry that I started my bucket list under duress. I think it's much better to really think about your bucket list personally when it's not under duress and start making your bucket list. I've had friends who've been retired or forced to retire, or decided to retire, and all of a sudden they said, oh my God, I don't know what to do with myself. And I'd go back and I'd say, well, tell me what you were involved with, or let's talk about what you were doing when you were working. And many people said, well, I really didn't have time to do anything. And if I had one thing that I would say to people, and again, I know I'm not an expert in life-changing or whatever, but I've actually spoken about this a bunch. I really think it's important to really start on that bucket list before, you have to make that first, check off that first item, to really think about what interest do I have? What are my passions? What can I start doing now? Whether it's picking up that guitar that, has been sitting in the corner for, decades or whatever it may be. So that bucket list is sort of an evolving kind of thing. And it's not duress that forces you into it.
And I like that you shared too, that your bucket list didn't just encourage pursuing your own passions, but helping others, because that's when you both really turned to philanthropy. So tell us a little bit about your philanthropic work and how it was informed by your Jewish values.
Yeah,
sure.
So
I'm going to turn to Rob.
Yeah, and I want to certainly credit my parents who were extraordinary visionaries in philanthropy. Dad and mom actually set up a center at Rutgers University. It's called the Bildner Center for Jewish Studies. They were always active. They were on boards. They were going to federation meetings. I mean, that happened to be their type of philanthropy. But Dad also set up a diversity initiative at colleges in New Jersey to encourage diversity training. I think part of it came from being in the food business, which is a business that's really geared to working with so many people. And so that was my model. It was a mentor. They were mentors. And when Elisa and I got married, we were very fortunate. We were selected for the Wexner Heritage Program, a Jewish study program for lay leaders. And we both were immediately jumped on a bunch of boards. But by studying with Wexner, we began to realize there were areas within the Jewish community that needed more philanthropic attention. And we just settled on Jewish summer camp. We felt that Jewish summer camp is a treasure, but it just wasn't getting the amount of resources and the support it needed from our community. So in 1998, we had this crazy idea driving back from some conference in a snowstorm. I don't even know how we even made that decision. We just decided, hey, we're going to start a foundation for Jewish camps, and we're going to do it. And we put our heads together. We found a lot of people to support us. And as Elisa mentioned, Edgar Bronfman became a mentor to us in philanthropy. And I think it's really important to have mentors. And I just want to, mentors.
I'm so glad you mentioned the foundation, because Foundation for Jewish Camp has not only supported Camp Alanim, but one of our locals around the corner, one of our neighborhood, Julie Platt, is going to be your new foundation director, correct?
She is our chair, and we were on the phone with Zoom with Julie yesterday, talking about the amazing things that the foundation under Julie's leadership have done.
And shout out to Marcia Mancoff,
who's on our board as well, and maybe there are other board members. So
well, it's all Los Angeles people, so I just have to give a shout out to our Los Angeles philanthropists.
Please do.
So I would just say one thing
for 1 second, Elisa.
Sure.
You talked about the influence of your parents and your grandparents. I want you to talk about the influence of your own children. I know you have 4 of them, 2 grandchildren and 1 on the way. Tell me about how that has helped you also pursue this 3rd act.
Oh, I think Rafi, the story of Rafi.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story of Rafi. Although I just want to add one thing to what Rob said, because again, I think it's instructive and helpful. It's really useful when you're involved in whether it's an organization or some aspect of your life, you see where there are voids. And it was pretty obvious to us that there was a void in terms of supporting Jewish camp. And that void just sort of talked to us and said, jump in it. So I think it's always useful to look at, what's not being said, what's not being done. There are plenty of opportunities. Not everything has, been done.
Right, and not everything requires money. I want to just cite that out. It's not necessarily that you've had, you've had good fortune and we're blessed by God by that, but service is, there's all kinds of ways we serve, and our time is our most valuable service. So it's not about just it's not just your money, it's your time, it's your service.
So yes, and we're very involved in politics, and I will say people come to us all the time and say, what can I do? I don't have enough money to really influence a campaign. It doesn't matter. There are many, many ways, but that's another story. I'll just tell you briefly about Rafi and how we got us involved, frankly, in this whole project. And I actually think of Pirkei Avot, and I think it was Ben Zoma, who talked about, you can learn from anybody. And it's been always sort of a real, it's part of, I'd say, our philosophy. You can learn from everybody, and you can certainly learn from your children. And we've learned extraordinary amounts from our children. So Rafi, during middle school, started a garden in our backyard in Beckett, which is our second home. And he used to sell in front of our house all of his beautiful fruits and vegetables, on the road. And then when he was in high school, he took a semester and went to the mountain school in Berkshire, Vermont, which teaches high school juniors how to farm just for a semester. He did that, and then started, literally farming our backyard. And it was an intensively farmed, sustainable farm. And we were fascinated by what he was producing, which was extraordinary. We'd go to the farmers markets, and through him, we noticed several things. One, that farming is incredibly hard, tough way to make money. Shabbat dinners Friday night, he was up all night preparing for his Saturday morning farmers market. And through him, we met farmers and saw what their lives were like, and saw what small family farms do to bring us the most extraordinary food, and thought, God, I bet people really don't know about it. Even the Berkshires, which is a rural area, we've been here 35 years. Literally, it was our second home, was really our first home. And in all of this time, we never met farmers because they're in the back roads, sort of like where Jewish camps are. You don't see them. Yeah. And because of that, we learned from him about farmers, and it piqued our curiosity to try to tell the story of small family farms, and then of course bring out recipes inspired by these farms.
I mean, we were so inspired by these people, and again, another crazy epiphany. We decided we need to tell these stories. And of course, as I said, I wanted a project to express my photography. Elisa had her culinary background. And honestly, I think we're able to make things happen and put things together. And we got a contract with Countrymen Press, and boom, we've been doing a book tour now over this last year, virtually.
And I think, returning to our farming roots is very Jewish. Also, learning from our children. When we actually turn our hearts to our children is when the Messiah will come. So let's pivot to the book for a moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is a book about people, and food is the vehicle. And I want to know, you both love food, and you both love cooking, and you have expertise in it. But I want to know how much this is really a book about humanity and telling people stories, and that vehicle is food. And which one was your ultimate goal?
So honestly, when we do book talks, we say that this is really two books in one. This is a cookbook of wonderful, I would say, pretty simple, accessible stories. I'm quoting actually Florence Fabricant, who featured our book in the New York Times. It's a book of recipes that you can do, inspired by these farmers. That's one book, and we think it's a great book. The second book, and this is what you're alluding to, it's a journalistic essay and photo, both journalism and photography.
I just have to say, you have the busiest house. You're well over 60. The phone is ringing. The dogs. I love it. It's
we're in the basement, just so you know. We're about as far away as you can get.
And our 2.5-year-old grandson.
And 3 dogs and telephones. Right, anyway, they're not even close to here. But anyway, the other part is really the story, because my background after law was journalism, heavily journalism, and Rob's background is photography, as he discussed. And so it's really the story of small family farms and farm-to-table chefs, and what it's like to be these people who literally, for many, I'd say most of them, for ideological reasons, have decided to sacrifice money, comfortable life, to bring everybody food that is healthy, that is great for the environment, that tastes better. And I'm sorry to diss on California, but it hasn't been, schlepped across country whatever.
For us.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a story. I think we're very motivated to tell stories about people. We got to know these people. To be honest, we really were so impressed by how hard they work and their challenges. And, we became friends with these farmers. And we really wanted to tell their stories because they are extraordinary people. They're doing this because they care about us meaning our community, the way our health, our environment. They are not doing this for money. They're doing this.
And food is so intimate, right? Food is a very intimate experience. Yes. Tell me, any of the farmers Jewish?
So yes, there were 3 farmers who were Jewish. I think 3. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 3 farmers who were Jewish. However, okay, let me let you finish your question, because yes, there were farmers that were Jewish.
Yeah. But most of the farmers were not Jewish.
Correct.
Yeah, and the book is not a kosher cookbook, and yet it is laden with Jewish values. Tell me a little bit about how you communicated that even when you have pork tenderloin on page 200, which you would never cook, I understand.
I did
But
not.
tell us about that and how
Yeah.
the thinking was to elucidate Jewish values and illuminate Jewish values.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll jump in
on.
I mean, we've had a bunch of book talks at various JCCs and synagogues, and we talk about this. Look, we'd say, Baal Tashkit, protecting the environment. That's what these farmers are doing. So our Balei Chaim, treating animals humanely. Our farmers are not, mass slaughtering animals and oppressing their workers. Oshek, treat our workers kindly and fairly. So we feel that supporting locally grown foods, supporting small farmers, as Elisa and I have said in our books, is a quintessentially Jewish act. So we think you're right on target. There is a history of Jewish farmers in our area. They were chicken farmers primarily, and that's just a legacy of the past. But we feel this is a Jewish story. Although, as we say, one of our most kindest to animals farmers raises pigs, and they're extraordinary in the way they articulate how we should care and be thoughtful when we slaughter animals. And really treat them with respect.
It's funny.
You ran over it very quickly, Rob. Like the Jewish law has a lot to say about how we treat our animals, how we leave payoff for the poor, what we do, how we rotate our crops, how we treat our land. And I think one of the things that I was really struck with in the Berkshires Farm to Table Cookbook is how much you focused on how these people care deeply, not just for the product, but for the process. And I think that's something that you guys are sharing, that the process of, quote, aging is not necessarily about the product, but being deeply engaged in it, right? So what do you think you're most engaged in currently?
Most recently, quite honestly, we're incredibly involved in this presidential campaign. I mean, we both we're active in the Biden campaign. We've been active in the Senate races. We have a network of wonderful people who are similarly committed. We've worked with, and we've been inspired to that. As we've said, the way we find that we can pivot and learn is by being in networks, whatever they are. So that's for sure.
What advice do you guys give to people who, this is mental illness has been quadrupled. People are very stuck at home. There's a reason that torture is being isolated, right? People are really struggling to even get up the courage or the energy to just go for a run. What advice do you give people in this moment who aren't feeling all that excitement and passion for repairing the world?
So look, I think it's a great question. And again, I caveat, I'm not a psychologist, but here's what I would say. And I was actually saying this to somebody the other day. I'm really I feel terrible, as we all do, for the people who are suffering in terms of health during this time. And if you don't have your health, it's very hard to do anything, third act, second act, first act, whatever it is. That being said, I think it's really important to sort of flip the mirror here and look at this time as a real opportunity. And, I know people talk about the Chinese symbol for, opportunity, whatever it is, there's an opportunity here. Yes.
Crisis
opportunity. A crisis, that was it. Crisis is really opportunity. Thank you. There's an opportunity here to go through, and you spoke about bucket lists earlier, bucket lists. So this is a time that, when do you get the time to literally be at home? Because you have to. You may not want to, but you have to. And have the time to do all kinds of things. So for me, one of my goals, or one of my hats is I'm a yoga instructor. Honestly, this is a time I really can practice yoga. I can really go through all of these yoga courses that I've wanted to take. I mean, that's just one thing. I want to become more digitally, advanced. I look at this, I've got, the idiot's guide to everything digital piled up in every, against one wall. This is my time to go through them. It's my time to think about what our next step is.
Take something that sparks your interest, like we're in the week of Hanukkah. So something that sparks your interest and really sort of dig deep. And I'm going to actually encourage people to inspire each other. If you've taken on a new passion and this third act, I want you to put it in the Q&A, because
Okay.
not
Great.
only are
That's
the
wonderful.
right, not only are the Bildners here to inspire us, but we're here to inspire each other. So if you've
Totally.
taken on a third act, please. So I want to pivot and ask you guys some questions because we've got a fair amount coming in.
Sure.
Sure.
The first question is a little bit, I think, truth telling. Not everybody has the financial resources
Right.
and the
Right.
social connections.
Totally.
And what do you recommend for those who are suddenly retired? Maybe they've been forced to retire in this pandemic. For over 40 million people have lost their jobs, have some savings, and are on Medicare. What do you suggest in terms of pivoting and keeping your head up through this?
Yeah, so of course, I mean, there's so many opportunities to pivot, let's say, whether it could be creative. We have a friend who retired, who is taking up painting, and she
Several.
loves it. We have many
Several.
friends actually who are
There's a
doing
new
that.
crop of painters coming.
I know it sounds, I don't know, it sounds small, but even knitting circles. My sister-in-law is in a very extensive network of folks who knit. Pardon me, quilters, yeah. And that's a major positive influence in her life. We mentioned politics. Of course, we can all be involved in political work without giving a nickel. There's so much work on the ground, needless to say.
Happy to help you on this.
And by the way, we're actually
Get in touch with us. Happy to.
We know so many organizations. Volunteering. We have a friend, a dear friend, who's become joined the board of a homeless organization supporting folks who are homeless. And she's doing some wonderful work now, trying to promote them. It's on and on and on. It's almost like there's so many opportunities, and it doesn't require money to do.
I'd love to jump in if I could, Sherry, for one thing, because I think it's really important. A lot of people say, I don't have a passion, or I'm not sure what I really care about, or, now I'm retired, and like as you say, I may not have a lot of money, whatever it may be. And I think it's really important to be able to find your passion. And I think it's very doable. And I often say to people, because I have friends who've asked me this, and I've actually spoken about this, which is, again, I think sometimes people look at what they're doing as in the same old way. And you have to look at sometimes what you're doing with new eyes, with a beginner's mind. As if you were a baby just discovering something for the first time. And you will find virtue in so much of what you do that you may thought was just, your normal life, but maybe there are things that are really would pique your interest if you just look at them a little more closely. Like maybe you doodled or whatever, maybe that's painting. The other thing I was going to say is, I often say to people, walk into a bookstore. And okay, maybe you don't walk in right now. Maybe you're on Amazon or bookshop.org, supports your local bookstores. And sort of, where do your eyes go? Where's the first aisle that you go to? What's the first page that you go to? That really sort of tells you a lot about what your interests are. But again, to go back to what I said earlier, don't denigrate things that you've already done that you may not realize are very special or that you have a special interest in, but you just always have been doing
And I'd
that.
add one more thing. Don't be afraid to fail, or at least,
Right.
I mean, I've had failures in my life, business, social, personal. I'm a good photographer. I don't think I'm the world's greatest photographer, but it's not stopping me from trying to become a better photographer. So I think that's something that sometimes it's hard to try something because we're afraid. We're just afraid. And I'd say, try it. You don't know where it's going to lead you.
Hold on one second. You guys have so much
Sure.
to say, and I want to make sure we
All
just
right.
have some real nuggets for people to take away. First of all, this idea of going into a bookstore and seeing what naturally you gravitate to. The second is seeing through your grandchildren's eyes, right? And what inspires you. And then third, the other nugget is to not be afraid. Actually in the Torah, it says over 40 times, Al tira, don't be afraid. And it's not because God is reminding us over and over again because our instinct to be afraid of failing. One of the things that I think is harder in the more mature years is that you feel like you have less of a window to fail, right? You don't know, if I fail now, where am I going from here? So what do you say to people who say, like, I am afraid? I mean, I don't have that much room for failure.
So I think that's a very good point. And one of the things that I was thinking about in advance of this talk is that I feel particularly about to turn 67. I hate to put it on the airwaves.
Really? That's amazing.
But
I didn't know
Really?
that.
Because I was thinking 39,
oh,
maybe.
thank you. Keep going, Sherry. Go down. A little lower. Anyway, so I lost my train of thought. I was going to talk about. Wait a second.
There we go.
Here we go.
There
I
we
must
go.
be like no. No, I was going to say that it's really important to pick things that are meaningful. Like I'm at the point in life where I'm getting off of boards that aren't meaningful to me, turning down requests that aren't meaningful to me. Again, you do take a sort of a little more of a narrow view, but on the issue of failure, I think you can't afford to take that view because there will be failure. And I just want to say, as somebody who's like, I've gone from law to journalism, to being a CEO, to being a yoga instructor, to being a chef, to being a book writer. I mean, all these things. If you think I do them all equally well, I'm telling you, I don't. And I will tell you that becoming a yoga instructor, and particularly a Jewish yoga instructor, and becoming a professional chef were the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Harder than being a CEO, harder than graduating from college, all this kind of stuff. And you know what? It was worth every bit of it. I will not be the best yoga instructor in the world or the best chef. I can tell you that right now. But it's okay. It is totally okay. I don't always have to be the best. And I think you have to go into that with that sense that,
Elisa, I think that message is very important, which is it's not about being the best and the top of the field and making the most money doing it. It's about giving you meaning. And someone just wrote in, go back to what you loved in childhood and find it and pursue it. And someone also wrote, we're getting a lot of questions. Are you guys available for consulting and counseling?
Sure, that's our next act, no problem.
But we also heard from people that they've pursued pottery. They did something they've never done before, and that enabled them to explore and discover things about themselves.
Well, so, for me, I'd just say photography is something like that. I mean, I've been taking photos since I was a kid, but evolving and actually now learning and training and working with master photographers, it's been very, very gratifying for me. And of course, have a book to showcase photos has been really special.
And Sherry, what you said about going back to childhood, I will tell you that, and I think that's such a wise observation. When I was a kid, I created a neighborhood newspaper, and I went around and interviewed all the people in my neighborhood and wrote it up with crayon, whatever, before digital days, etc. And what did I end up loving the most, among other things in my life? Writing and interviewing people and whatever. So I think that's so wise what you said and so true.
I do.
Better than bookstores.
I also want to go to one part of that question you just asked, which is, as we get older, isn't it, it's more daunting, I guess, because we look ahead and there isn't as much time left. But I find that I'm inspired by my elders, and elders to me, elders who are, at the age of 90. I can think of, I'll just do a shout out for Josh Weston, who some people may know is an extraordinary former chair of ADP, an amazing philanthropist, has brought, hundreds of people to Israel. Julie Eisen, who's on our board, I won't mention more names, but people who just are so full of life, are always trying new things. And Julie's wife, Susan, who's a major potter. I mean, I can go on and on. They inspire me. And I just don't, there's a lot of life left. And we don't know what's going to come tomorrow. But again, let's not, don't be afraid. Try new things.
And I want to mention, before you guys go on, so many people are writing in how they've pivoted. And I love this.
I love it.
Someone is scanning 15,000 family photos onto zip drives and providing it for all their children. Someone became a postpartum doula and is using that skill to help low-income women. There's taking a weekly drawing class at a museum of art.
Great. I love this.
A survivor is speaking at high school students on digital, right? There's so many ideas that are coming. Pottery. I want to pivot for a second to the book, because first of all, I'm not a cook. And yet I loved this book because I love people. And these stories are so meaningful. So as you profile these people, there is some recipes that we need to know this week in particular. In particular, page 98, which is the savory beet latkes. And I know, Elisa, you have a sample of them.
I do. I'm happy to show it to you.
Would
Hold
you
on
mind
1 second.
sharing them with us?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about,
And do you want to look at the
yeah, I
latkes
think,
while you're?
yeah, I'm just gonna move because we have two cameras, as you know,
We're
and
just
hopefully you'll be
gonna-
able to see this well enough. Hold
We're
on 1
gonna
second.
just switch our
Different cameras.
studio, and here's Elisa by the Latkes.
Okay, so, latkes. I got a whole bunch of food in front of me, which I'll just mention some of them to you, but in particular, since it's Hanukkah, I'm gonna hold up two different kinds of latkes. It's really hard to see. Woo, they're gonna fall
No,
out.
I can see perfectly.
Okay, so these are Rutabaga Latkes made with rutabagas. Of
Okay, wait.
course.
For the non-chefs that were in rabbinical school
What's
and played tennis, what is rutabaga?
Okay, so rutabaga is a root vegetable. It also, and this, by the way, and so are beets. Here are beets. These are beet goat cheese latkes. And here's some homemade applesauce. And just very briefly, so
I need to see the applesauce because I love
Yeah.
applesauce.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, in that case, I'll start with the applesauce. Applesauce, to make your own applesauce, takes about literally 5 minutes. And this is a confession, and all those who are on Zoom with me, I don't want you to tell anybody else, but the truth is I peel apples when I'm on Zoom calls. So I can make applesauce in a nanosecond because I have all my apples peeled because I'm sitting on my Zoom calls underneath the table, like peeling my apples. Okay, so that's number one. And then you throw the apples into a pot, add a little bit of applesauce, apple juice. I don't use sugar. Throw in a little stevia if you want, a little nutmeg, a little cinnamon, and you have the most incredible applesauce. And there's no reason to ever buy applesauce again because this is so much better. So I mentioned the applesauce, and there's a recipe for it, so you can do the exact recipe.
I believe the applesauce recipe is right after the latke recipe.
It is, because you want to top your latkes with the applesauce. Okay,
And
so
the goat
latkes.
cheese.
Okay, so latkes. So a whole bunch of stuff here, but let's talk about latkes. I'm in front of the chocolate. We'll get to that. But okay, the latkes. Just a few hints on latkes. First of all, latkes are like a canvas for anything. They don't have to be potatoes. You can stick whatever you want in. And here's the thing, in grocery stores, we pass by the rutabagas, and the beet latkes have celery root in them. And these are all kinds of weird vegetables that you walk by and you say, what am I doing? What am I going to do with this stuff? Because they don't look great and whatever. They make phenomenal latkes and all kinds of other foods too. And they are in both of these recipes. Just a few tips on latkes I'll just mention really quickly. One is to make really good latkes, again, because I'm really interested in health as well. I don't deep fry my latkes. You can bake them too. I really pan fry them. So I use very, and you'll see in the recipes, very, very little oil. They come out just fine. They're not deep fried. I use, and I do them in organic canola oil. It should be organic if it's canola oil, and oils that have a high heat, that they can take high heat. You can make them very quickly, and frankly, I make them 4 minutes on each side, and they're done. And by the way, I talk to my Alexa the whole time and say, Alexa, set the timer for 4 minutes, and then flip into the other side. It's like, it's like truly a no-brainer.
You are so impressive with how modern you guys are. I don't even use Alexa, and I'm the most techy person I know.
Alexa, so my 2.5-year-old grandson listens to me talk to Alexa all day long. Alexa, could you play Hatikva? Alexa, can you play Hinei Rakevit? This is what I've been doing. And he thinks Alexa's a person who comes out of the wall and plays all these songs for him. Anyway, the other thing I'd say about latkes, to have really good latkes, and I think this is really key, you must wring out the vegetables after you grate them. And I only grate with food processor. Yeah, hand grating is very nice. I want my knuckles. I want to keep them. And the truth is, they're just as fine with food processor.
Also, I think, many people struggle with arthritis and have issues with their hands. I know, after years of using my hands for all kinds of things, that if I was hand grating, I would be done in 15 minutes.
Yeah, right. So I started that way because I thought purist. Use my mother of blessed memory, who really is my muse on anything cooking, hand grated, and I give her lots of credit. But no, I use food processors. But the stuff comes out of a food processor, and particularly when you're doing these rutabagas and the celery root and the beets and whatever, in a moment on beets in a second, comes out really wet. You must wring them out. Wring out all the liquid, or you have very soggy latkes. And the other key to latkes is when you put them in the pan, it's actually easier for me to do this. When you put them in the pan, you want to keep your pan with just a few latkes in it. If you have a lot of latkes in it, it brings the temperature down and they become soggy, and they also start steaming, which you don't want. You want to pan fry them so they become crisp. So those are probably the two most important things with latkes that I can think of. I'll just mention really briefly, because I know we're under time pressure, just some other things here. I'm just so you know, I'm an incredibly lazy cook. So everything I do, it's got to be as simple as possible. I'm not, doing French laundry kind of whatever cooking to name the famous California restaurant. So these are great holidays. These are ganache with dried fruit, actually dried wild Maine blueberries in them. It takes literally 10 minutes to make, absolutely 10 minutes to make. And what's the local angle on all these, which is really important? The more you use local food, the better your recipe will be. So I use the dairy I use, which is here, is High Lawn Farms dairy. This is pasteurized, not ultra pasteurized milk, a cream, which makes a difference, heavy cream. And it's much better flavor than the commercial pasteurized, ultra pasteurized stuff, which is high heat and loses its flavor. So that's where the secret to these, which are made with cream, and I don't make them with sugar. I use a sugarless chocolate chip. So they're not health food, but you can make everything much healthier. So I'll mention those. I could do a demo of them, but we probably don't have time.
Well, I'm going to stop you there because I know that we also want everybody to experiment with going to the cookbook and actually looking at it. And I love what you said is that you're a lazy cook because I'm a messy cook, right? By the end, everything just looks like a big mess. But I love that one of the things you stressed earlier was it's not about being perfect. It's about really enjoying the process. So Elisa, as you make your way back to the chair.
No problem. Okay.
I want to say a few things to our audience today. There are so many questions asking about if you guys still live in the Berkshires. So I'm going to encourage people to go to the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook. The link is in the Q&A. And also, how do people reach you if they have questions directly?
Sure. Absolutely. So the best way to reach us is through our website, which is berkshiresandbeyond.com. And maybe, Sherry, you guys.
We'll put it up, berkshiresandbeyond.com.
Berkshiresandbeyond.com. And we also have very active Instagram and Facebook, another area we pivoted to in this new act. Because we have to keep up with what's happening with the farmers.
I love that rolled off your tongue. We're very active in Insta. I mean, I want to say to you guys, do you have a Finsta account too? Really?
Not yet.
No.
But I have to admit, for us to actually, I think we're about 1,400 Instagram followers, which is pretty amazing since I didn't even know what Instagram was about, a year ago. So, but that's a great way to get a hold of us. I'd say the website's probably the best. And we're happy to respond to anybody who's been on this Zoom. I'm very inspired by some of the things you've shared.
Right, we'd love to hear what people have pivoted to. I mean, it's very inspiring.
Let's inspire each other. It's great.
So,
it's great.
Before we go, I want to first say to the both of you, you're so inspiring, not just in the way that you continue to pivot, but also in the way that you share one mind. The two of you really are a model of what marriage is like. And I think that could be a whole nother session. So I first want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your Torah, and also for your philanthropy, because you've really modeled what can be and how this is not over. There's a great quote by Franz Rosenzweig. In his 80s, he was asked if he wears tefillin, and he responded, "Not yet." And what I loved about, and what I continue to love about that response is he was in his 80s. And every answer to every question should not be no, I'm too old, I'm too tired, I don't have the energy, but not yet. And I think both of you live that with such honesty and integrity. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. I want to say to all our guests today, thank you so much for joining us. There were so many questions. I wish I could answer them all, but we're going to encourage you to go to Berkshires and Beyond and ask Elisa and Rob directly. I want to thank also all the people at AJU who make this happen. Be well, stay well. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you so all.
Much,
it's a great honor
really
to be here. Thanks.